In the spring of 1942, a 22-year-old Scottish soldier named Alistair Urquhart was sitting in a prison camp in Singapore. He had joined the Gordon Highlanders, one of Scotland's most celebrated regiments, at the age of 20. 2 years earlier, he had been stationed in Singapore, a posting that felt, to a young man from Aberdeen who had never left Scotland before, like the beginning of an adventure. Singapore was warm. Singapore was exotic. Singapore was nothing like Aberdeen. He had probably thought about home, about his family, about the specific smell of Scotland in the morning. He was probably thinking about those things on February 15, 1942, when the British Army surrendered Singapore to the Japanese. 85,000 Allied soldiers captured. In what Winston Churchill called the worst disaster and largest capitulation in British military history, Alistair Urquhart was 22 years old. He was now a prisoner of war, of the Imperial Japanese Army, in a part of the world where being a prisoner of the Imperial Japanese Army in 1942 was not something that came with any guarantees. What happened to him over the next 3 years has been described by historians as statistically impossible. He survived the death railway. He survived a hellship torpedoed in the Pacific. He survived 3 days alone in shark-infested water. He survived the atomic bombing of Nagasaki. He came home to Scotland. He told nobody, not his mother, not his friends, not his colleagues, not anyone, for 60 years. And here is the question that trauma psychologists have been studying for decades, not just about Alistair Urquhart, but about every soldier who came home from impossible things and said nothing. What does 60 years of silence do to a human brain? And what happens neurologically and psychologically when that silence finally breaks? Welcome to Untold Archive, the channel that finds the stories of warriors, survivors, and underdogs who faced impossible situations and extracts every lesson they left behind. Today, Alistair Urquhart, the Scottish soldier who survived 4 separate events that should each have killed him, came home, said nothing for 60 years, and then told the world everything. In a story that contains the most important lesson about trauma, silence, and survival that this channel has ever told. Stay with this video until the midpoint, because there is one specific thing that happened to Alistair Urquhart in the water after the hellship was torpedoed that trauma psychologists use as a case study in what the human brain does when it decides survival is the only acceptable outcome. Stay for that. Let's go. Number 1. The soldier before Singapore. To understand Alistair Urquhart, you first need to understand where he came from, because this was not a man who grew up expecting to become a legendary survivor. He was born in Aberdeen, Scotland, in 1919. A city of granite buildings, cold North Sea winds, and working-class families who understood the value of hard work. Urquhart left school at just 14. He found work in a department store and began building an ordinary young man's life. Then at 20, he joined the Territorial Army, the British Army Reserve. For young men in Aberdeen, it wasn't necessarily about preparing for a world war. It was about weekends, training, friendship, adventure. But in 1939, everything changed. Germany invaded Poland. Britain entered the Second World War. The weekend soldiers became real soldiers. Urquhart was called up and assigned to the 2nd Battalion Gordon Highlanders. Eventually, he was sent to Singapore. For a young man from Aberdeen who had barely seen the world, Singapore must have felt almost unreal. Number 2. The fall of Singapore. On February 15, 1942, Singapore surrendered to the Japanese. It was one of Britain's most devastating military defeats. The Japanese army had advanced rapidly through Malaya, moving through terrain British commanders had believed would slow them down. But it didn't. And when the Japanese reached Singapore, the defenders discovered a terrible weakness. The island's major defenses had been designed primarily to face an attack from the sea. The Japanese had come through the land. Britain's supposedly impregnable fortress collapsed. Around 85,000 Allied troops surrendered. Among them was 22-year-old Alistair Urquhart. He was taken prisoner and eventually sent to Changi, but captivity was only the beginning. The Japanese needed thousands of workers to construct a railway connecting Thailand and Burma. The project would become known as the Burma-Thailand Railway, the Death Railway. Approximately 16,000 Allied prisoners and around 100,000 Asian laborers died during its construction. Urquhart was sent to work on it. The conditions were horrific. Prisoners worked for hours in extreme tropical heat. They faced malaria, cholera, dysentery, starvation, exhaustion, and brutal punishment. There was little medical care, little food, and almost no protection from disease. Men became skeletons. Wounds became infected. People collapsed while working. Number 3. The HLLSHIP. In 1944, Urquhart was placed aboard a Japanese transport ship. These vessels became known among Allied prisoners as hellships. They were cargo ships converted to transport prisoners. The men were packed into dark, overcrowded holds beneath the waterline. There was barely enough food or water. Ventilation was poor. Heat became unbearable, and prisoners had no idea where they were going. Then disaster struck. An Allied submarine spotted the Japanese ship. The submarine did not know prisoners were aboard. It identified an enemy vessel. The torpedo was launched. The ship was hit, and Urquhart was suddenly in the South China Sea. Survivors faced another horror. Some prisoners drowned. Others were killed. And those who remained in the water had to fight exhaustion, dehydration, and the terrifying possibility of sharks. Then came the most extraordinary part. Urquhart remained in the water for 3 days. 3 days. No food, no fresh water, almost no shelter, just open sea. Around him were wreckage and dying prisoners. Yet somehow he continued. He refused to stop fighting. Number 4. Nagasaki. Urquhart was taken to Japan and eventually forced to work in a coal mine near Nagasaki. By then, he had already survived years of captivity. He had survived the death railway. He had survived a sinking ship. He had survived 3 days in the ocean. Then, on August 9, 1945, the world changed forever. The United States dropped an atomic bomb on Nagasaki. Urquhart was underground in the coal mine when the explosion occurred. The mine offered him protection from the immediate effects of the blast. He survived. When he eventually emerged, the city around him had been transformed. Buildings were destroyed. Thousands of people were dead. The world he had known had disappeared in seconds. Just days later, Japan surrendered. Number 5. The science of silence. For decades, Urquhart carried his experiences silently. He didn't forget what happened. He simply didn't talk about it. And that distinction is important. Traumatic experiences are not always stored in the mind like ordinary memories. They can remain as fragments, images, sounds, sensations, and emotions. A person may remember everything and still struggle to explain it. Psychologists sometimes describe this pattern through concepts such as avoidance and trauma-related memory fragmentation. The mind may avoid revisiting experiences that feel overwhelming. Silence can become a form of protection, but eventually, that silence can also become a prison. For Urquhart, the breakthrough came 60 years after the war. In 2009, at the age of 90, he published his autobiography, The Forgotten Highlander. For the first time, he told the complete story. The railway, the starvation, the hellship, the ocean, the sharks, the coal mine, Nagasaki, everything. And by turning those memories into a narrative, he transformed scattered experiences into a story. Number 6. What Urquhart's. The Forgotten Highlander became a bestseller. Thousands upon thousands of people finally discovered the story of the Scottish soldier who had survived some of the most horrific conditions of the Second World War. Urquhart died in 2015 at the age of 97. But his greatest lesson isn't simply about war. It is about survival. We often think survival means escaping death, but sometimes survival means something much more complicated. It means learning how to live with what happened afterward. Urquhart survived the death railway. He survived the hellship. He survived 3 days in the South China Sea. He survived Nagasaki, but he also survived 60 years of silence. And eventually, he broke that silence. His story reminds us that resilience does not mean being fearless. It does not mean being unaffected. It means continuing despite what happened to you. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is simply take another breath, another step, another day. And sometimes, decades later, it means finally telling the story. Because the past cannot always be erased, but it can be understood. It can be placed into words. It can become something that happened, rather than something that is still happening. The lessons are not what most people expect. Lesson 1, survival is only the beginning. Alistair Urquhart survived things that should have killed him, but surviving was not the end. He carried those experiences for 60 years. Sometimes, the hardest part begins after the danger is gone, learning how to live with what you survived. Lesson 2, silence can be the brain's protection. Trauma can make painful memories difficult to explain or even put into words. That silence is not necessarily weakness. Sometimes, the brain is simply protecting itself from experiences it has not yet learned how to process. Lesson 3, telling the story helps you heal. Urquhart remained silent for 60 years, but eventually he told his story. Writing, talking, or sharing your experience can help turn painful memories into something you can understand and carry differently. Sometimes, telling the story is part of finally moving forward. Alistair Urquhart survived the death railway, a sinking ship, 3 days in the sea, and the atomic bombing of Nagasaki. But perhaps his greatest victory came decades later, when he finally found the words to tell his story. He turned 60 years of silence into the forgotten Highlander. He showed us that survival isn't just about staying alive. Sometimes, it's about finding the courage to finally tell the world what you survived. The forgotten deserve to be remembered. Subscribe to Untold Archive for more extraordinary stories of the people history almost forgot.